In the late 80s, heading into the early 90s, there was a genre of music that turned the world on its head, and it was called grunge music. Let's get into it. Well, welcome to the Jam Shed, everybody. I'm so glad you're joining me today for our very first Shed Talk. And what's a Shed Talk? Well, it's just me having a quick conversation with you about something that inspired me in my musical journey. And I was also challenged a bit by this topic for today, our inaugural topic, which is the grunge pedal. And I have one here, but it's not the first one. And really, that's the reason why we're talking about it today. So let's get into it. Now, I don't have the full story on this, if I'm giving full disclosure, but the grunge pedal is unique because it was a product of a movement, and there was a sound associated with this movement, and the band probably most responsible for that is Nirvana, and they had a very specific eclectic sound. And for those of you who've gone down that rabbit hole, man, the gear choices back then that Kurt was using with his recording sessions was very varied. I mean, and hard to find and rare. And so it's fascinating how a company, and this company was DOD or DOD, came behind this and said, we can do that. And not only can we do it, we're going to, and we're going to have some fun with it. And so let's talk about the pedals, because the pedal I showed you earlier, which is this pedal right here, this grunge pedal, is not the pedal. If you notice, maybe you can see it there. It says DigiTech. This is not a DOD. And that is where my mind went, I've got to figure this out. So what is the story? What is the history there? And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today as we tee up this shootout, this grudge match I'm going to have with the grunge pedal versus the TS9. So a little bit of background. These pedals were released in the 90s, starting I think in 1993. There was a version of this pedal that came, it's very similar to the one that you see here, but it was all black. And then the one that we all know from the DOD company was basically manufactured from, I think, 94 to 97. And then there was a transition period with these pedals that took place where DOD was purchased or bought out by DigiTech, and then DigiTech kept the grunge pedal, but they also refined it. And while each one of these ones, the black grunge pedal to the purple grunge pedal, maybe had some small variations, the biggest change was into this pedal. And this pedal was, I borrowed this from my friend, so thank you, sir. I appreciate it. This pedal here is probably the one that's most different from all the other versions and the versions that we came to know in the 90s. And by the way, the comments on that pedal, because I grew up during that time frame, were hilarious because you either loved or hated a grunge pedal. They were I'd say in most circles, they were probably loathed. And today they have kind of an occult following because they're very unique in what they sound like. And while I'm not going to demo that here today, that's coming in a subsequent video, but I had to actually go find one of those pedals, and I did. And so in a couple of days here, we'll get that on the channel. But I just wanted to jump on here and say, it's amazing how a genre can define a movement, and then the gear associated with that movement is real. And it's even better when I think about the nuance of what Kurt was actually using to get these sounds, and then how a pedal brand came behind it and said, we're going to attempt to recreate it. And it's fascinating because they made money on that. And people are making money today, selling things at a premium because Kurt Cobain's name is tied to them. And again, it goes back to this thing we call gear acquisition and how we as musicians strive to get to something. And then we get the shiny box and they slap a name on it and they call it grunge and they put cool labels on it like loud and low and high and grunge, and they just have a ball with it. But then at the end of the day, while that was not the thing that made the movement, it becomes a thing associated with the movement. And so what is the purpose of my video today? Just to check in with you, to say, hey, a random thought. Did you know the grunge pedal existed? And two, did you know it probably doesn't sound anything like the gear Kurt was using, but maybe it does. And three, there are many versions of it that now have become somewhat collectible and expensive if you're looking on Reverb or eBay, depending on which version you're looking at. And three, there's a refined version, which is the one I have here, that is really probably more of a modern take on what we would see in an overdrive or distortion pedal. And so I was a bit fascinated by that, and I wanted to shoot this video to tee up our next grudge match where I'm going to get an early 90s version of the Grunge pedal, and I'm going to pit it against my TS9. And once I've done that, the next video that we're going to do is going to actually take the most modern version and this more probably era specific, the DOD version, and see how different they are. And the question is, why? Well, because it's fun. And it's the reason for these videos, is to just have a conversation with you. And secondarily, what is your attachment to that era? I mean, there are so many bands that are lumped under this grunge genre. And I would say that my top 10 probably reside in that era. No, maybe not. Maybe my top 5. I would say in my top 5, there's probably 3 of those bands from that era, because that's the era I grew up in. And it's just amazing how, if you think back to when things are getting started, when a movement happens and the gear that's associated, and you can do the same thing if you go back to the 70s, and you can look at today and you can see people going back after those plexis and looking for those particular cabs and getting a Vox wah and all of these things. And at the end of the day, I've said it before, those are just things, but it is fun to explore. And it is fun to have conversation about it. I mean, David Lamb, the designer of this pedal, he designed I think it was called the Distortion 250, which was like a predecessor to the Tube Screamer. And again, the Tube Screamer is the pedal that now defines what I would call the gold standard for an overdrive pedal. And it's just fascinating the connections we can make with all of this gear. But it also likens back to why I started this channel. 1, to have fun. 2, to talk about the random thoughts that are on my mind and share them as passive content, because that's all this is. These are not meant to be hard facts, by the way. I would say, if you are interested in the grunge pedal, do some more research. And if there's something I missed or you want to add to this discussion, throw it in the chat. Because again, our channel is about having an ecosystem where we're not looking to bash or say something's good or bad. We're really having a conversation about unique gear and gear in general and what we can be inspired by. And this weekend, seriously, had no idea that I was going to be down a rabbit hole learning about the grunge pedal and the various versions of it and the expense associated with it, to tee up some more content for one reason and one reason only. Because you know what? It's a unique community we can share and have fun with. And that's what we're here to do. So that's all I've got for you guys today. So stay tuned, because while I'm ending today's shed talk on a high note, because I have a grunge pedal, and thanks, Tom, for letting me borrow this thing. I appreciate that. But more so, just I'm thankful for all of you, and I'm thankful for you joining us, or joining me on this journey as we learn together. Take care, everybody.